I was thrown out of my own house by my daughter-in-law. My son nodded. It's time you take care of yourself. I called the police, but the one who answered was her father. With no way out, I knelt on the sidewalk. That's when a mysterious man walked up to me and said 3 words. You remember me? Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Diana from California. Thank you for being part of our family. No, let me tell you everything. My name is Dorothy, and at 68 years old, I never thought I'd be sitting on cold concrete, watching strangers walk past my own front door. The trouble started on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was watering my plants in the sunroom when I heard Lisa's sharp voice cutting through the house. David, we've discussed this 100 times, she snapped at my son. Your mother has got to go today. I dropped my watering can, water splashing everywhere. They were planning my removal again. But Mom built this greenhouse herself, David said weakly. She's lived here since I was in diapers. Was being the key word, Lisa shot back coldly. We've been covering her expenses for 2 years now. I'm tired of pretending we're running a retirement home. My heart broke into pieces. Yes, David had been helping with my bills since my pension wasn't enough, but this house held 50 years of memories. Every plant in my greenhouse told a story. Every room echoed with laughter from birthday parties and holiday dinners. I walked into the kitchen trying to stay calm. Lisa, if this is about me using too much electricity for my plants, I can cut back on the heating. This isn't about your stupid plants, she interrupted, her blue eyes as cold as winter frost. This is about space. This is about privacy. And honestly, Dorothy, you're in our way. David stood behind his wife like a shadow. At 42, my son looked so much like his grandfather. But Grandpa Joe never would have let anyone speak to family that way. David, I whispered, surely we can find another solution. This is my home too. He wouldn't look at me. Mom, maybe it's time you considered assisted living. You'd have activities, people to talk to. The words hit me like cold water. Assisted living. I wasn't helpless or confused. I still drove, cooked, and cared for my garden. I'm 68, not 88, I said, my voice shaking. I don't need to be put somewhere. Lisa stepped closer, her red fingernails drumming on the counter. You need to understand something, Dorothy. David and I are planning our future. We want children and we need space for a nursery. Your plant room could be perfect for a baby. My plant room. The space where I'd grown tomatoes for the whole neighborhood, where I'd taught David to plant his first seeds, where I'd spent countless hours creating beauty from nothing. They wanted to erase me completely. Where am I supposed to go? I asked quietly. Lisa shrugged carelessly. That's not our problem anymore. You're a grown woman. Figure it out. The cruel indifference in her voice left me speechless. This was the woman my son had chosen over his own mother. I need some time to pack and find a place. You need to leave today. Lisa cut me off. I've already called someone to change the locks at 4 p.m. I turned to David, searching his face for any sign of the little boy who used to help me bake cookies. David, please. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there crushed me. Defeat. He'd already given up on me. It's time, Mom, he said softly. It's time for you to start fresh somewhere new. 4 hours later, I stood on the sidewalk with 3 garbage bags and a small box of photo albums. The locksmith was already working, the sound of drilling echoing like a funeral bell. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called 911. Emergency services. What's your emergency? I've been illegally kicked out of my home, I said, trying not to cry. I need someone to help me. Ma'am, you'll need to call our family services line for housing disputes, the operator said. But they changed my locks. They won't let me get my things. The line went quiet for a moment. What's the address? I gave my address and heard her sharp breath. Ma'am, I'm transferring you to Officer Martinez. He covers that area. A deep voice came on the line. "This is Officer Martinez. I hear you're having family troubles." "Yes, I've been locked out of my home by my daughter-in-law and my son won't help me." "Look, lady," he interrupted. "Family fights aren't police business. You should have worked this out before it got this bad." My blood turned to ice. "How do you know it's a family fight?" He laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Let's just say I'm familiar with the situation. My advice: find somewhere else to sleep tonight. Don't make trouble." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone in shock. How did this officer know about my situation? How was he familiar with it? Then it hit me. Martinez. Lisa's last name was Martinez before she married David. The police officer was Lisa's relative, probably. Her brother or cousin. I fell to my knees right there on the sidewalk, overwhelmed by how trapped I was. I had nowhere to go, no one to call, and even the police were working against me. Tears poured down my face as I realized how completely alone I felt in this world. "Excuse me, ma'am," a gentle voice said. "Are you hurt?" I looked up through my tears to see a man in his 70s standing nearby. He had kind gray eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and wore a simple brown jacket. He reminded me of someone, but I couldn't place who. "I'm fine," I lied, wiping my face with my sleeve. He looked at my bags, then at the house where Lisa was watching from the window with satisfaction. "No," he said softly. "You're not fine. And you shouldn't have to sit on concrete like this." He paused, studying my face carefully. "You deserve so much better than this." Something about his voice made my heart skip. There was something familiar about the way he spoke, like an old song I'd forgotten. The man reached out his hand to help me stand, and when our fingers touched, 45 years disappeared in a heartbeat. "Tommy," I whispered, the name escaping my lips like a prayer. His gray eyes crinkled as he smiled. The same smile that had made my teenage heart flutter all those years ago. "Hello, Dorothy." I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my chest. Tommy Chen, my high school sweetheart, the boy my parents had forbidden me to date because they said mixed relationships weren't acceptable back then. The young man I were safe. When I heard about your husband passing 3 years ago, I thought about reaching out, but I wasn't sure it would be right. My knees felt weak. "You knew about Harold." "I know many things, Dorothy." His voice carried deep sadness. "I know about the medical bills that ate up your savings. I know your son has been struggling to help you. And I know that woman in there has been making your life miserable for months." I stared at him in amazement. This ghost from my past somehow knew all the details of my current nightmare. "How could you possibly know all that?" Tommy glanced toward the house where Lisa was still spying on us from behind her curtains. "Small community. People talk. And when you care about someone..." He trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. "Care about someone," I repeated in disbelief. "Tommy, we haven't spoken in 45 years. "No," he said quietly. "We haven't. But that doesn't mean I stopped caring about what happened to you." The weight of his words settled between us like a bridge across decades of silence. I felt dizzy from the impossibility of this moment. "Come on," he said, reaching for one of my bags. "Let me get you somewhere warm. We have a lot to catch up on." I wanted to refuse, to keep some dignity, but the truth was I had nowhere else to turn. I picked up my box of photos while Tommy took my other bags, and together we walked away from the house that had been my whole world for 5 decades. Tommy's apartment was everything mine wasn't. Anymore, quiet, welcoming, filled with the kind of simple comfort that spoke of peace rather than conflict. The living room had soft lighting and plants everywhere, real plants thriving in every corner. "Tea," he offered, and I nodded gratefully. While he was in the kitchen, I looked around more carefully. The furniture was modest but well kept, not fancy but comfortable. Photos covered a bookshelf, mostly landscapes and what looked like community events. But there, in a simple wooden frame, was a picture that made my breath catch. It was me at 18, wearing my graduation cap and gown, smiling at the camera. I remembered that day clearly. It was the last time I'd seen Tommy before my parents made me promise never to see him again. I've kept that picture with me through every move, every year, every change in my life, Tommy said quietly from behind me. I turned to find him holding 2 steaming mugs, his expression open and vulnerable. Tommy, what happened to you after we were separated? He handed me the tea and I caught the slight sadness in his voice. I went to trade school, learned to be an electrician, did odd jobs around town for years. Nothing fancy at first, just me and my tools trying to make an honest living. He settled into the chair across from me, and I noticed he moved with the quiet dignity of someone who'd worked hard his whole life. I had something to prove, you know. I needed to become the kind of man who could have been worthy of your parents' approval. Tommy, I started. But he held up a gentle hand. Let me finish, please. The business grew slowly. I got a reputation for honest work, fair prices. By the time I was 40, I owned a small electrical contracting company. By 50, I'd saved enough to buy property. He met my eyes directly. I never married, Dorothy. Never even came close. The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to face. Why? I whispered. Because every woman I met I compared to you, and none of them ever made me feel the way I felt when I was 17 and holding your hand after school. Tears stung my eyes. Tommy, we were just kids. I was so young. My parents thought they were protecting me. Your parents were protecting their image, he said, not unkindly. They'd already decided Harold was right for you. Established family, secure future, no complications. They couldn't risk their daughter with some Chinese kid from the poor side of town. It wasn't fair, I protested, but even as I said it, I knew he was right. My parents had pushed Harold and me together from the start, constantly mentioning what a good match we were, how stable our life would be. Harold was a good man, I said quietly. He loved me. We had a good marriage. I'm sure you did, Tommy replied, and I could hear how hard it was for him to say that. I'm glad you were happy, Dorothy. That's all I ever wanted for you. But had I been happy? Looking back through 43 years of marriage, I realized I'd been comfortable, content. Harold had been steady, dependable, a good provider and father. But had there been excitement? Had there been the kind of love that made you feel alive? I need to ask you something, Tommy said, leaning forward. That woman Lisa, what's her full name? Lisa Martinez, I answered automatically. Why? Tommy's expression grew dark. Martinez. Thought so. Her brother is Officer Martinez, isn't he? The one who dismissed you when you called for help. My tea mug shook in my hands. How did you know that? Because I know the Martinez family, and I know how they work together. Lisa's brother has been cutting corners for years. Small things mostly. Overlooking code violations for friends, ignoring parking tickets for family. Nothing big enough to get him in real trouble, but enough to make him useful when someone needs a favor. What are you saying? Tommy stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. I'm saying this whole thing, your eviction, the locksmith, the convenient police. Response, it was all planned. Lisa didn't just decide this morning to kick you out. She's been working on this for months, probably since she first moved in. The room seemed to spin around me. But why? What did I ever do to her? You existed, he said simply, turning back to me. You were a reminder that the house wasn't really hers, that David had a life and family history before her. Some people can't stand sharing space or attention. I thought about all the small conflicts over the past year. Lisa. Rearranging my kitchen without asking, throwing away my old furniture, making comments about how much room my plants took up. I'd thought it was normal adjustment problems, but Tommy was suggesting something much more calculated. There's something else, Tommy said, his voice dropping. I did some research after I noticed how she was treating you. Lisa Martinez has been in serious relationships before. What do you mean? She's had 2 previous long-term boyfriends, both older men with property. Both relationships ended with the men giving her significant gifts or money before she left them. My blood went cold. You're saying she's done this before? Tommy nodded grimly. And both men had elderly parents who mysteriously became too difficult to live with during the relationships. I set down my tea with shaking hands. What would you say if I told you I've been planning for this day for 8 months? Ever since I moved back and saw what was happening to you. Planning what? A slow smile spread across his weathered face, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of hope. Lisa Martinez has no idea who she's messing with. Tommy poured himself another cup of tea. His movements calm and deliberate. Tell me something, Dorothy. Do you remember our last real conversation? The one we had before. Your parents made you write that goodbye letter. The memory hit me like a physical blow. We'd been sitting in Central Park after my high school graduation ceremony. I was 18, he was 19, and we'd been planning our future with the innocent certainty of young love. You said you were going to save up money and we'd get married after I finished college, I whispered. And I said I'd find a way to convince my parents that love was more important than social status. I said I'd prove to them that I was worthy of their daughter. His voice carried 45 years of determination. I said I'd work as hard as it took to give you the life you deserved. I closed my eyes, remembering the girl I'd been, so sure that love could overcome any obstacle, that my parents' disapproval was just a temporary problem. We were so naive. I was naive about your parents, he agreed. But I was never naive about my feelings for you. And I never stopped working toward that promise I made. Tommy walked to a small desk in the corner and pulled out a thick manila folder. When he returned, he spread documents across the coffee table between us. Property deeds, business records, bank statements. 8 months ago, when I decided to move back to this neighborhood, I started buying property. Not randomly, strategically. He pointed to a map with several addresses circled in red. I recognized the street names around my neighborhood. Tommy, what did you do? I bought 6 buildings in a 4-block area around your house, including the apartment complex where I live now. He met my eyes steadily. And 4 weeks ago, I purchased something else. He pulled out another document, and I felt the world shift beneath me. It was a mortgage buyout agreement for my house. The house David and Lisa thought they were paying for. That's impossible, I stammered. David's been making payments. The bank would never sell without telling him. The bank was happy to sell a difficult loan to a cash buyer willing to pay above market value. Her son has been struggling with those payments, Dorothy. He's missed 2 in the last 4 months. I felt sick to my stomach. He never told me that. Because Lisa convinced him not to worry you with money problems. She also convinced him that once you were out of the picture, they could refinance for a lower payment and things would be easier. So she knew they were in financial trouble and she still insisted on throwing me out? Tommy nodded grimly. Because she assumed they'd have months to figure it out. What she doesn't know is that as of last week, I own the mortgage on your house. Which means I can demand full payment at any time. The implications hit me like lightning. You could evict them tomorrow. I could, he agreed. But that's not what I'm planning. At least not yet. I stared at him. This man who'd loved me from a distance for 4 decades, who'd become successful and powerful while never forgetting the girl who'd broken his heart. Why are you doing all this? Because 45 years ago, your father told me I'd never be good enough for his daughter. He said I was just some poor immigrant kid who would never amount to anything, and that if I really loved you, I'd disappear so you could have the life you deserved. Tommy stood and walked to the window, his back to me. I believed him, Dorothy. I thought he might be right. So I walked away, and I spent the next 4 decades proving him wrong. But it was never really about him. It was about becoming the man you deserved. Tommy, I whispered. I never married because I never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, I'd get another chance to give you the life I promised when we were kids. The weight of his confession took my breath away. You built a business empire for a memory? I built it for you, he turned back to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. And now that selfish girl thinks she can just erase you from your own life. Take away everything you've worked for. Not while I'm still breathing. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it and smiled grimly. Speak of the devil, he said, showing me the screen. That's David calling. Seems they've discovered their mortgage has been transferred. My heart raced. What are you going to tell him? Nothing yet. Let them worry for a while. He declined the call. But I think it's time I told you about the other property I've been working on. Tommy pulled out architectural drawings, clearly professional blueprints for a house. A beautiful house with clean lines and what looked like my breath caught. Is that a sunroom? The biggest greenhouse room in the county. His voice was soft, vulnerable. I had it designed 2 years ago after I heard about Harold's passing. I bought the land. 15 acres just outside town with a view of the mountains. I told myself it was an investment property, but really I was building the home I should have built for you 45 years ago if I'd been brave enough to fight for you instead of walking away. He stood up suddenly, overwhelmed by what he was telling me. This wasn't just about helping me with Lisa and David. This was about a love that had survived decades of separation, a dream that had never died. I need some fresh air, I said unsteadily. Tommy nodded and opened the sliding door to his small balcony. The evening sun was setting, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. I could see my old house from here, including the backyard where my garden used to flourish. You really have been watching over me, I said softly. Just making sure you were safe, he said quickly. When I saw how that woman was treating you, it took everything in me not to march over there and tell her exactly what I thought. Why didn't you? Because I had no right to interfere. You were married to another man, living the life your parents chose for you. I figured my job was to stay in the background and just make sure you were protected if you ever needed it. I studied his profile as he gazed toward my old house. What happens now? Now we turn the tables on Lisa Martinez. His phone rang again and this time he answered it. Hello, David. Even from where I stood, I could hear my son's anxious voice through the speaker. Mr. Chen, this is David Peterson. I understand you've bought my mortgage. I have indeed. How can I help you, David? Well, sir, I'm hoping we can discuss payment arrangements, maybe work out some kind of plan. I think we should meet in person to discuss this properly, Tommy interrupted smoothly. Why don't you and Lisa come by tomorrow morning around 10 a.m.? There was a pause. Lisa. Does she need to be involved? Oh, absolutely. Miss Martinez will definitely want to be part of this conversation. Tommy's voice carried an undertone that made me shiver. I have a feeling she'll find our discussion very educational. After that, she's not the only one who knows how to play games. What if they can't make the payments? What if you have to foreclose? Tommy turned to me, his expression serious. Dorothy, that house was never really theirs. It was yours and Harold's. You raised David there, made it a home. The fact that they've been making payments for 2 years doesn't erase 5 decades of your life. But David is my son. I don't want him to lose his home. David made his choice when he chose his girlfriend over his mother. But people can learn from their mistakes when they finally see the truth about who they're dealing with. His phone buzzed with a text message and Tommy showed me the screen. It was from an unknown number. We know you're interfering. Back off or you'll be sorry. Tommy actually laughed. Lisa's getting desperate. And when people get desperate, they make stupid mistakes. Tommy, what if she tries something dangerous? Then she'll learn that messing with you means messing with me. And I'm not the 18-year-old kid her family used to be able to intimidate. He pocketed his phone and took my hands in his. Dorothy, I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? Looking into his eyes, I saw the boy who'd once promised to take care of me and the man who'd spent 45 years keeping that promise in his heart. Yes, I whispered. I trust you. Good. Because tomorrow morning, when they show up thinking they're going to negotiate with some random businessman who bought their mortgage. They're going to discover they're dealing with someone who's been planning this reunion for decades. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just surviving or hoping things would get better. I was about to take control of my own story. And I wasn't fighting alone. I spent that night in Tommy's spare bedroom, though sleep came in short bursts. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa's smug expression as I sat on that sidewalk, or David's face when he told me it was time to start fresh somewhere else. But mixed with the hurt was something else, a growing excitement I hadn't felt in decades. At 7 a.m., Tommy knocked gently on my door. "How did you sleep?" "Like someone whose whole world just got turned upside down," I said honestly. "But also like someone who might actually have hope for the first time in months." He smiled and handed me a cup of coffee. "Good, because we have 2 hours before showtime, and I want to prepare you for what's going to happen." We sat in his small kitchen as he outlined his strategy. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Let them think they were dealing with a typical property investor. Let Lisa's arrogance and sense of entitlement expose her true nature, and then reveal the personal connection that would shake their world. "What if David doesn't believe you?" Yes. "What if she's turned him so completely against me that he won't listen to reason?" "Then we'll know where his loyalties really lie," Tommy said gently. "But Dorothy, I have a strong feeling your son is about to see his girlfriend's real face for the first time." At exactly 10 a.m., David's car pulled into the parking lot. I watched from the upstairs window as my son and his girlfriend walked toward the apartment building entrance. David looked nervous, constantly adjusting his tie. Lisa, on the other hand, walked with the confident stride of someone who expected to charm her way out of any problem. She dressed carefully for the meeting, a professional-looking black dress paired with heels that clicked authoritatively on the pavement. Even from a distance, I could see her calculating expression as she studied the building, probably estimating how much money Tommy had and planning her approach accordingly. Tommy had positioned himself in his small home office, looking professional in a navy blazer and khaki pants. He'd asked me to wait in the adjoining bedroom where I could hear everything through the thin walls but remain hidden until the right moment. The doorbell rang and I heard Tommy's footsteps as he went to greet them. "David, Lisa, please come in." His voice carried clearly through the apartment. "Mr. Chen." David's voice was tense. "Thank you for meeting with us on such short notice." "Of course. Please have a seat in the office. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great," David replied. "Just water for me," Lisa said, and I could practically hear the fake sweetness in her voice. "I have to say, Mr. Chen, you have a lovely place. The view is amazing." "Thank you. I renovated it when I moved here 8 months ago. Please make yourselves comfortable." I heard chairs scraping and Tommy returning with drinks. When he spoke again, his tone was businesslike but friendly. "So, let's talk about your mortgage situation. As you know, I purchased your loan from First National Bank 4 weeks ago." "Yes," David said carefully. "That surprised us. We'd been working with the bank on a payment modification, and suddenly we got a notice that the loan had been sold." "Banks make financial decisions based on risk assessment," Tommy replied smoothly. "Your payment history over recent months indicated a higher risk than they were comfortable with." I heard Lisa shift in her chair. "Mr. Chen, I'm confident we can work out an arrangement that benefits everyone involved. David and I are completely committed to that house. It's our home, our future." "I understand the house previously belonged to your mother-in-law," Tommy said, his voice revealing nothing. "What's her current living situation?" There was a pause, and I could imagine the look that passed between them. "Family situations can be complicated," Lisa said finally. "Sometimes it's healthier for everyone when elderly relatives have their own independence. Less stress, more privacy for all parties involved." "Interesting perspective," Tommy replied. And where is Mrs. Peterson living now? Another pause, longer this time. She's exploring her options, David said uncomfortably. She has possibilities. Does she? Tommy's voice had developed a subtle edge that made my pulse quicken. Because from what I understand, she was given less than 1 day's notice to leave the premises. That seems rather harsh for someone who'd been living there for, 5 decades? Mr. Chen, Lisa interjected, her voice sharpening. I'm not sure why David's mother's housing situation is relevant to our mortgage discussion. This is about business, not family drama. You're absolutely right, Tommy agreed. This is about business. So let's discuss numbers. Your current mortgage balance is $184,000. Your monthly payment, which you've missed twice in recent months, is $1,547. We can get caught up, David said quickly. I've been dealing with some temporary issues at work, but things are improving. I'm sure your girlfriend's brother's legal troubles haven't helped with expenses, Tommy said casually. The silence that followed was deafening. Of course you don't, Tommy replied smoothly. Just like you don't know about your previous relationships, or the financial settlements that seemed surprisingly generous for someone with no apparent income or assets. Who the hell are you? Lisa snapped, her careful facade cracking completely. Lisa. David's voice was shocked. What's he talking about? What previous relationships? It's nothing, honey, Lisa said quickly. Just some misunderstanding. Mr. Chen, I think you have me confused with someone else. Lisa Marie Martinez, previously Lisa Garcia and Lisa Rodriguez, born in Riverside County, moved here 3 years ago right after your second breakup ended badly. Both previous boyfriends coincidentally had elderly family members who became too difficult to live with during your relationships. David, Lisa said, her voice rising. We need to leave right now. This man is obviously some kind of stalker or... Sit down, David said quietly, and something in his tone made the room go silent. I want to hear what Mr. Chen has to say. Tommy's voice remained calm and measured as he continued. Your current boyfriend doesn't know that you've had 2 serious long-term relationships before this one. Does he, Lisa? Or that both followed the same pattern? Move in with a man who has property, isolate him from his family, gain access to assets, then move on when things get complicated. That's not true, Lisa protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Your first boyfriend, Carlos Garcia, signed over his grandmother's jewelry collection to you 6 months before you broke up. His elderly grandmother, who'd been living in his spare room for 3 years, was convinced to move to a nursing home. She died 4 months later. I heard David's sharp intake of breath. Your second boyfriend, Miguel Rodriguez, transferred ownership of his late father's truck to you as a birthday gift. His widowed father was persuaded to move in with relatives in another state. The truck was sold 2 weeks after your breakup. David, don't listen to this, Lisa pleaded. He's making it all up to what? Tommy interrupted. What possible reason would I have to lie about something so easily verified? Public records, Lisa. Vehicle registrations, property transfers, nursing home admissions. All matters of public record. Why are you telling us this? David asked, his voice hollow. Because, Tommy said, and I could hear the change in his tone. Your mother didn't deserve to be thrown out of her own home by someone running the same scheme she's pulled twice before. My mother, David repeated. What does my mother have to do with any of this? Everything, Tommy said simply. Because 45 years ago, I was in love with her. And yesterday I watched her sit on a sidewalk crying after being kicked out of the home she'd lived in for 5 decades. The silence stretched so long I wondered if they'd all frozen in place. Finally David spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? My name is Tommy Chen. Your mother knew me as Tommy Chen when we were teenagers, before her parents decided I wasn't suitable for their daughter. That's impossible, David breathed. Mom never mentioned. Your mother received pressure from her family when she was 18, explaining that she was going to marry your father and that we couldn't see each other anymore. I left town the next day. I thought I'd lost her forever. I heard footsteps, then Tommy's voice closer to the door. Dorothy, would you come in here, please? My hands were shaking as I walked into the office. David's face went pale when he saw me, while Lisa looked like she'd seen a ghost. Mom! David stood up slowly. What are you doing here? She's here, Tommy said, moving to stand beside me, because when I saw her sitting on that sidewalk yesterday, begging not to be thrown out of her own home, I realized I'd been given a second chance to do what I should have done 45 years ago. Which is what? Lisa demanded, her voice shrill. Tommy looked directly at her, his expression hard as stone. Protect the woman I love from people who want to hurt her. The words hung in the air like thunder. David stared at his mother, then at Tommy, then at his girlfriend, who looked like she was planning her escape route. This is crazy, Lisa said finally. David, we're leaving right now. No, David said quietly. No, I think I need to hear the rest of this. Lisa's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and from the desperate look in her eyes I could see she was about to do something drastic. Lisa's face had gone from calculating to panicked, and I recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same expression I'd seen countless times over the past year when she felt cornered, cold, manipulative, and dangerous. David, she said, her voice taking on that sugary tone she used when she wanted something. This man is obviously obsessed with your mother. This whole mortgage thing is probably just a way to get close to her. We should call my brother. Your brother? Tommy asked mildly. The same Officer Martinez who told your mother-in-law that family disputes weren't a police matter? The one currently under investigation for corruption. David turned to stare at his girlfriend. Your brother is a police officer. You told me he was a firefighter. Lisa stammered, then recovered quickly. I never said that. You must have misunderstood. No, David said slowly. I remember specifically. You said your brother was a paramedic, that he saved lives every day. You even showed me his commendation certificates. Tommy smiled grimly. Certificates of valor, life-saving awards, community service recognition. Impressive collection. Too bad they belonged to a paramedic named Robert Martinez who died in a car accident in 2019. Your brother bought them at an estate sale. The color drained from Lisa's face. How could you possibly know that? Because I make it my business to know about people who hurt the woman I love. And when I started investigating your family, Lisa, I found a very disturbing pattern. Tommy walked to his desk and pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the others. Officer Martinez has been supplementing his income for years. Small bribes, looking the other way on health code violations, fixing tickets for the right price. But 4 months ago he made a big mistake. He took money to ignore a noise complaint that turned into something much worse. That's not true, Lisa whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. The neighbors ended up calling the fire department when they smelled smoke. When investigators asked why there was no police response despite multiple calls, they discovered your brother's little side business. David was staring at his girlfriend as if seeing her for the first time. Lisa, what is he talking about? He's lying, she said desperately. David, baby, you know me. You know I would never. Do I? David interrupted. Because repeated. Yes, weak. Just like you're weak when it comes to asking for that promotion. Weak when it comes to standing up for yourself. Weak when it comes to everything that actually matters. Lisa was in full meltdown mode now. Years of hidden resentment pouring out. I've been managing your life for 3 years, making the tough choices you're too spineless to make yourself. Managing my life. David's voice was dangerously quiet. Someone had to. Left to your own devices, you'd still be living in that tiny rental, working the same boring job, never taking any chances. I pushed you to buy the house. I made you take over the mortgage. I convinced you to apply for the management position. You convinced me to abandon my mother, David said, and I could hear the realization hitting him like a freight train. I convinced you to prioritize your future over an old woman who wasn't going to be around forever anyway, Lisa shot back. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son's face cycle through emotions, shock, hurt, disgust, and finally a cold anger I'd never seen from him before. "Get out," he said quietly. "What?" "Get out of here." "I don't want to look at you anymore." Lisa's eyes widened. "David, you don't mean that. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 3 years," he said, standing up. "You used me. You manipulated me into betraying my own mother. And for what? Money. A house. For us." Lisa pleaded, reaching for his. "Everything I did was for us, for our future together." David jerked away from her touch. "There is no us. Not anymore." Lisa's desperation turned to rage. "You think you can just throw me away after everything I've done for you? I made you into someone worth respecting, and this is how you repay me. By respecting my mother. By refusing to be part of your sick game. Yes, this is exactly how I repay you." Lisa turned to Tommy, her eyes blazing. "This is your fault. You've poisoned him against me with your lies and your obsession with a woman who chose someone else 40 years ago. The only poison here," Tommy said calmly, "is the one you've been feeding your boyfriend since the day you met him, making him believe his mother was a burden, that his loyalty to his family was weakness, that the only way to be a real man was to choose you over everyone else who'd ever loved him. She's a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has moved on," Lisa snarled, pointing at me. "She's jealous of what David and I have together." "Had," David corrected coldly. "What we had. Past tense." Lisa whirled back to face him. "You think you can just walk away? You think it's that simple? I know things about you, David. Things that could ruin your career, your reputation." "Like what?" Tommy interrupted smoothly. "Like the fact that he's been struggling to make mortgage payments. Like the fact that his girlfriend has been lying to him about everything from her family background to her previous relationships. Or maybe you're talking about the anonymous complaints that have been filed with his employer about his unstable home situation." Lisa's face went white. "How did you know about the complaints? The ones you filed yourself. The ones designed to put pressure on David to choose between his job and his mother." Tommy smiled coldly. "I told you, Lisa. I make it my business to know about people who hurt the woman I love." "You've been filing complaints about me at work?" David asked, his voice barely controlled. "I was trying to help," Lisa said weakly. "If they thought your home situation was affecting your performance, they'd understand why you needed space from your mother. You were sabotaging my career to manipulate me into abandoning my mother," David said, and I could hear the final pieces clicking into place for him. Lisa seemed to realize she'd lost everything. Her carefully built web of lies was unraveling, and there was nothing left but the truth she'd been hiding. Her face twisted with fury as she turned on me. "This is all your fault," she hissed. "If you'd just gone quietly, if you'd just accepted that you weren't needed anymore, none of this would have happened." "You're right," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since entering the room. "If I'd just accepted being unwanted, you could have continued destroying my son's life without interference." "I was giving him a better life," she insisted. "You were isolating him from everyone who truly loved him so you could control him completely," I replied. "Just like you did with your previous boyfriends." Lisa's last desperate attempt was to appeal to David's emotions one more time. "David, please. Love you. Everything I did because I love you and wanted us to have a future together. Don't throw away 3 years of relationship over one misunderstanding." David looked at her for a long moment, and I saw something in his expression that reminded me of his father, a quiet strength I'd worried he'd lost forever. 3 years of lies isn't a misunderstanding, Lisa. It's fraud. And I'm done being your victim. "Fine," Lisa said, her voice turning venomous again. "Fine, but don't think this is over. I'll take you for everything you have. The house, your savings, your retirement fund. Actually, Tommy interjected, you won't. Because the house belongs to me now, remember? And unlike your previous boyfriends, David never signed anything transferring his assets to you. Lisa's face had gone. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to, Tommy said simply. Your previous boyfriends are very interested in talking to investigators about how you convinced them to give you valuable items. Seems they've been comparing notes. The fight went out of Lisa all at once. She stood there for a moment, looking between David and me and Tommy, and I could see her calculating whether there was any way to salvage the situation. There wasn't. This isn't over, she said finally, grabbing her purse. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. On the contrary, Tommy replied. I think we've finished something that should have ended the day you first decided to hurt an innocent woman for your own gain. Lisa stormed out, her heels clicking angrily across the hardwood floor. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. In the silence that followed, David sank back into his chair and put his head in his hands. Mom, he said without looking up. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. I wanted to go to him to comfort him, but 48 hours of betrayal and abandonment had left me cautious. David. No, let me say this. He finally looked up, and his eyes were red with unshed tears. I chose her over you. My own mother who raised me, who loved me unconditionally, who never asked for anything but respect. And I threw you out of your own home for a woman who was using me. You didn't know, I said softly. I should have known. I should have seen what she was doing. The words, I knew that our relationship would never be quite the same. Trust once broken takes time to rebuild. And I had my own future to consider now. A future that, for the first time in decades, was entirely my own to choose. 4 months later, I stood in the sunroom of my new home, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. The coffee in my hands was still steaming, and for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to get somewhere or worried about pleasing someone. The house Tommy had built was everything he'd promised and more. 15 acres of rolling hills, a greenhouse where I could grow all the plants I wanted, and a peace so profound it still sometimes took my breath away. But the most beautiful part wasn't the house itself. It was the man who'd kept a 45-year-old promise to build it for me. You're up early, Tommy said, stepping into the sunroom with his own cup of coffee. Even at 73. He moved with the quiet confidence that had first attracted me when we were teenagers. Old habits, I replied, leaning into his side as he wrapped his arm around me. Besides, I love watching the sunrise from here. No regrets, he asked, and I knew he wasn't talking about waking up early. None, I said firmly. Only that it took us 45 years to get here. We'd married 8 weeks ago in a small ceremony in our backyard with only a handful of friends attending. David had been there, standing as Tommy's best man with tears in his eyes as he watched his mother marry the man who'd loved her since they were kids. Lisa had left town the day after our confrontation, probably searching for her next victim. Last I'd heard, Officer Martinez had been suspended pending investigation, and Lisa had moved to another state entirely. David had moved into a small apartment downtown and was slowly rebuilding his life. Our relationship was healing, but it would take time. Some wounds run deep, and the trust between us had been shattered by his choices during those final months with Lisa. But he was my son, and I could see he was genuinely trying to make amends. Penny for your thoughts, Tommy said, following my gaze toward the mountains. Just thinking about choices, I said. How one decision can change everything. Having second thoughts about marrying an old fool who's been carrying a torch for decades. I turned to look at him, this man who'd built a business empire while never forgetting the girl who'd broken his heart. The only fool here is the one who waited 45 years to come find you. I couldn't come find you while you were married to Harold, he said gently, no matter how much I wanted to. That was one of the things I loved most about Tommy. His fundamental decency. He'd loved me from afar for 4 decades, But he'd never once tried to interfere in my marriage or cause problems in my family. Even when he moved back to town, he'd simply watched from a distance, making sure I was safe. "What are your plans for today?" he asked, changing the subject. "I thought I'd work in the greenhouse this morning. The tomatoes you planted are finally ready for harvesting." Smiled. "And this afternoon, I have something I want to show you." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "Oh, a surprise. Something I've been working on while you've been traveling for business." Over the past month, Tommy had been wrapping up his electrical contracting projects, preparing to step back from day-to-day operations and focus on property management. At our age, he said it was time to enjoy the fruits of his labor rather than working 12-hour days. "Should I be worried?" he asked with mock concern. "Only if you don't like surprises." After breakfast, I spent the morning in my greenhouse, marveling at the luxury of having nothing more pressing to do than tend my plants. The greenhouse was Tommy's wedding gift to me, a beautiful glass structure filled with raised beds where I could grow vegetables year-round. But my real surprise was in the art studio he'd built for me, where I'd been working on a project that I hoped would honor both our past and our future. That afternoon, I led Tommy down the stone path to the studio, my heart beating faster with anticipation. "Close your eyes," I said when we reached the door. "Dorothy, trust me." He closed his eyes and let me guide him inside. The studio was filled with afternoon light, and the air smelled of oil paints and turpentine. "Okay," I said. "You can look now." Tommy opened his eyes and gasped. I'd converted the studio into a workshop, complete with easels, brushes, and canvases. But it wasn't the art supplies that made him catch his breath. It was the painting on the central easel. I'd painted Central Park as it had been when we were teenagers, with the old bandstand in the background and two young people sitting on a bench planning their future together. But I'd also painted it as it was now, the park renovated and modernized, the two teenagers now, silver-haired and hand in hand. "Dorothy," he whispered. "It's beautiful." "I started painting again after I moved in here," I said. "I haven't held a brush since high school, but somehow being here, being happy again, it all came flooding back." Tommy studied the painting, his eyes moving from the young couple to the older one. "We look like we belong together." "We do belong together. We always did." He turned to me, his eyes bright with emotion. "You know what this means." "What?" "It means I finally get to give you everything I promised when we were kids. The house, the garden, and now time. Time to rediscover all the dreams you put aside for other people." I felt tears prick my eyes. For 43 years I'd been someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's caregiver. I'd defined myself by my relationships to other people, by what they needed from me. But here, in this place Tommy had built for me, I was finally free to be just myself. "There's something else," I said, leading him to another easel covered by a cloth. "I painted this one for David." I pulled away the cloth to reveal a portrait of the three of us, David as a little boy standing between Tommy and me. It was imaginary, of course, a vision of what might have been if my parents hadn't interfered all those years ago. "Do you think he'll like it?" I asked. "I think he'll treasure it," Tommy said. "Just like I treasure you." That evening, we sat on the porch swing Tommy had built, watching the sunset reflect off the distant lake. It was the kind of peaceful moment I'd dreamed of but never quite believed I'd experience. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd found each other sooner?" I asked. Tommy was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I think about all the lessons we had to learn separately before we could appreciate what we have together." "What kind of lessons?" "Happy being ourselves. Being 70-something and acting like teenagers," Tommy added with a chuckle. "Nothing wrong with that." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The pain of our original separation, the years of longing and regret, the betrayal and humiliation that had finally forced me to choose myself over the expectations of others. But mostly I thought about the miracle of second chances. How love, real love, can survive anything: time, distance, betrayal, loss. How it's possible to build a new life at any age if you're brave enough to reach for it. Tommy, I said softly. Yes. Thank you for not giving up on us. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. Thank you for being worth the wait. In the distance, an owl called from the pine trees, its voice carrying notes of wildness and freedom. I closed my eyes and listened, understanding for the first time in my life what it felt like to be truly home. Not in a house, not in a place, but in the arms of someone who saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. Someone who'd waited 45 years to keep a promise to a teenage girl who'd believed in his dreams. At 68, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. It's never too late to choose love. And when you do, when you finally have the courage to reach for the happiness you deserve, the universe has a way of giving you everything you've ever dreamed of and more. The house with the sunroom was beautiful. The garden was everything I'd imagined. But the real gift was waking up every morning next to a man who'd never stopped believing in our story. Some love stories end in tragedy. Others end in compromise. Ours ended in triumph. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.